My name is Tony. I'm 36 years old. I had Bell's palsy when I was 35 from October of 2013 until actually the beginning of December of 2013.
Hi, my name's Angelica Steele, and this is my final project for the MOOC Coursera course, Understanding the Brain, the Neurobiology of Everyday Life. I've interviewed my mother, a recent victim of Bell's palsy, and prepared a brief description of how the disease works. So to speed things up, let's dive right into the introduction. So, what is Bell's palsy? Basically, it's just a form of facial paralysis that resembles the effects of a hemiplegic stroke. This basically means that only half of the face is paralyzed, while the other half is functioning normally, or very close to it. This is caused by the failure or dysfunction of the seventh cranial nerve, or the facial nerve.
The things that you usually do that you take for granted because they're so easy, just getting in your car and driving, blinking, these are things that just stop when you have Bell's palsy. So I could not use a straw. I could not whistle. I couldn't kiss. Just if I gave Nicholas or you kisses, it was like weird because it was turned out. This side tried so hard to make the kiss face that it would end up over here, and this side would still stay down here. This whole corner of my mouth would always almost end up in the center of my mouth whenever I made the kiss, because it was trying so hard to overcompensate for this side not working at all. So there's like little things. For the most part, it's not something terribly hard to work with. It's weird.
So, after you got to the hospital and everything, what were some of the procedures that the doctors did just to find out that, or just to make sure that you did have Bell's palsy?
They did a full stroke code, the CAT scans and everything that they would do for a stroke to rule out a stroke. As soon as a stroke is ruled out, that's pretty much the diagnosis is Bell's palsy.
So, what was the most difficult thing for you to do? Like, out of all the difficulties that you faced from the paralysis, what would you say the, hardest thing
Eating.
was?
Honestly, eating was the hardest part in my opinion, because although the eye was annoying and you had to wear the eye patch, there was things that I could do, like I took the eye patch off to drive. I just made sure all the windows were up so no dust would get into my eyes. But the eating never changed. It was always the same thing because this side was paralyzed. Chewing was very difficult. To make my jaw open all the way and fight the paralyzed muscles on this side, it was very difficult. And I constantly, like I said, bit the inside of my mouth to the point where it was a sore this big right here on the inside of my mouth, because since it was paralyzed, it would just fall between my teeth every time I took a bite, and I couldn't stop it. So definitely eating was the hardest thing in my opinion.
So, how does this all work anyway? Well, the facial nerve is in control of the muscle in each half of your face. Everyone has two facial nerves, each controlling their own separate half. Though the nerve does branch out a bit past the face in some areas, its main function is to operate facial muscle, making things such as expression, blinking, and chewing possible. Sensory information from the face isn't received through this nerve, but through the fifth cranial nerve, or the trigeminal nerve. The facial nerve does receive taste sensations from the anterior two-thirds of the tongue, and is also responsible for some hearing sensation, though. Keep in mind this is very general in order to meet time limits. The real anatomy and function of the facial nerve is highly complex. Okay, so now that we know generally how the facial nerve works, how does this relate to Bell's palsy? Basically, Bell's palsy is caused by some type of failure of the facial nerve, whether it's swelling, inflammation, or compression. The cause of the failure, however, is unknown. It's thought that a viral infection is the cause of most cases. In my mother's case, she had previously gotten Lyme's disease from a tick bite, and that was what was linked to her Bell's palsy. The doctors also said that it may have been linked to a previous tooth infection, though that theory was never followed through with. Now, how would you know if you had Bell's palsy? Well, the telltale sign would definitely be the drooping half of your face, though this doesn't always happen right away. Because the facial nerve is so complex, every person is affected differently and may have different signs and symptoms. Like Professor Mason says, your brain, your illness. Some symptoms are common in most cases, though, as the ones shown in this slide. The time in which it takes the palsy to completely kick in also varies greatly between cases. One thing is certainly consistent throughout all victims' experiences, though. They realize just how important senses we take for granted are.
So that started in October sometime. I had no sense of taste. And then all of a sudden, on Thanksgiving morning, I woke up and I took a sip of my soda because I have an addiction to Diet Pepsi. I took a sip of my soda and tasted it. And this is the first time I had tasted anything in over a month. When you don't have a problem, when you've never experienced this, it's the weirdest thing in the world. To not have a sense of taste for over a month, it's almost weird eating. Like, what's the point? You can't taste it. So when anyone's ever like, well, what do you want to eat? It doesn't matter to me. I'm not going to taste it. Let's eat whatever you want to eat. For me, it's just to fill me up. So I don't know how I got so lucky, but it was Thanksgiving morning, one of the biggest eating days of the entire year, that I got my sense of taste back, and I was quite thrilled. I actually jumped up and down for a minute because I was excited to get my taste back that day.
Are there any, symptoms or just any difficulties you still face even after the, just after you've gotten your face back and everything?
For the most part, no. Only when I'm really tired. The biting of the lip will still happen, and sometimes I'll get soap in my eyes when I wash my face if I'm really tired, because some of the symptoms will come back a little bit, the drooping in the mouth and the eye. But for the most part, since I've been healed, I don't have problems the way that I did. It's just exhaustion that causes it, I believe.
So here's the main sources I used for my research. The links will be posted in the description if you want to learn more. Well, this course was definitely a lot to take in, so I know that with my memory, a lot of the specifics were lost. But I have gained a very good amount of general knowledge, at least. It's really interesting because now when I feel pain or a fever coming on, it's not as blind as it used to be. Before taking this course, if I or a relative were in pain or suffering from a disease even, my mindset was more focused on things like, take it easy, rest up, you'll be over it soon. Or if it were something more severe, my only thoughts would be, when am I going to see a doctor? What medicine do I need to take? When can I find someone else to fix me? I think overall I was in a much more vulnerable position, and now I feel a lot more in control of my body, how I function, how my actions affect my health, and so on. I don't feel as though I would need to hand myself or a loved one blindly over to a doctor as much as I used to. Not that I would take over as my own doctor or anything, but I just feel like I have a lot more insight as to what's going on in my body, that I would at least generally understand what a doctor were telling me if I were diagnosed with some kind of neural issue. And it just makes everything a lot less scary, and it feels empowering. But other than the awesomeness of how gaining new knowledge feels, I think my biggest benefit from this course is the appreciation that I've gained for the field and victims of neural diseases, disabilities, and impairments. I think before taking this course, I didn't realize the severity of the importance of the smallest functions that we have. I think more than anything, I've become much more grateful for my own health and gained a much larger amount of respect and admiration for people living with neural diseases and disabilities. Alright, so thank you very much for listening, and I hope I could help anyone needing a little insight into living with Bell's palsy. Bye!